Today marks the 10th anniversary of the arrest of BTK. Park City native Dennis Rader was taken into custody on February 25th, 2005. That arrest brought two men together.
Charlie Otero and Steve Relford were children when BTK brutally murdered family members. And when they met 10 years ago, they instantly forged a friendship. Today they call themselves brothers, even though the last decade has brought them totally different lives.
Sure is nice out here, man. It's like spring. Like starting all over fresh, you know?
Come on, little.
It's an unusually warm winter day. Friends Charlie Otero and Steve Relford decide to go fishing. The calm waters of a local lake, quite a contrast to what these men were experiencing 10 years ago.
Pretty soon the door opened and I was in.
It was then they came face to face for the first time with the man who brutally murdered Charlie's mother, father, brother, and sister.
First of all, Mr. Otero was strangled, or a bag put over his head and strangled.
This nightmares entailed reliving the scene that I found and reliving the torture and the screams nightly.
The man who strangled then 5-year-old Steve's mother right before his eyes.
Ran him around where my mama was, tried to untie the rope around her neck. I couldn't.
10 years ago, amidst a whirlwind of media, these men relived their childhood nightmares come true.
Sir, I have been advised it is your desire to enter a plea of guilty in this case. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Then BTK was finally locked up forever, for good.
Feels like yesterday, and at the same time, it feels like a million years ago. So much has happened in our lives since his capture, and it's just really hard to put it into perspective.
When Dennis Rader was arrested, Charlie had just been released from prison after serving time for domestic violence. Since then, his life has totally changed.
Well, a lot of it I attribute to the fact that he got caught, that Dennis Rader was caught.
Charlie has had a full-time job for several years, currently as a service manager at a motorcycle dealer in El Dorado. He has a fiance and a home. Quite a contrast to his life before BTK was captured.
I was on the other side of the tracks, morally, ethically, physically, you name it. I was not a member of society, but now I am. It's something I haven't been able to do since my family was killed.
I drink to escape. A lot of times it works, sometimes it don't.
For Steve Relford, things haven't gone as well. He has been in and out of rehab and jail several times, and he has trouble keeping a job. He's tried several times to turn things around, but he says the pain is still great. You watched him kill your mother.
Yeah. I watched him put that bag over her head and rope tied around her neck. That killed me.
Currently, Steve shuttles between friends' homes. Have you been homeless at all anytime these last 10 years?
Oh, yeah.
Where do you live when you're homeless?
Under bridge in tent. I lived in tent on the river for a while.
During those times, Charlie brings Steve blankets and food. Other times, they share more important things.
We share feelings, and we share an understanding about how each other feels because of this common devastation to our lives that went down. So, yeah, Steve understands me, and I understand Steve like probably not too many other people do. Fresh starts. They're always good. You don't get that many in life.
Now, Charlie has been trying to convince his friend Steve to get a fresh start for a while now. You see, Steve never got any counseling as a child after he saw his mother murdered. It's difficult finding the right combination of help now. So 10 years after Dennis Rader's arrest, two friends bonded by tragedy still struggle.
That was CNN exclusive. He confessed to 10 murders almost 2 decades ago. He was known as BTK, a name he gave himself, short for bind, torture, kill. He is currently serving life sentences at a maximum security facility in Kansas. And now there is new evidence that may connect the infamous BTK serial killer to additional murders. Arjun Casares spoke to the killer's daughter and got exclusive access to some of his diary entries and drawings.
She was a very full of life, typical teenager.
This is Cynthia Dawn Kinney, a 16-year-old cheerleader who vanished from an Oklahoma laundromat in 1976. The self-proclaimed BTK serial killer is now the prime suspect in her case and several other unsolved homicides spanning 3 states. It was parts of this journal belonging to BTK, real name Dennis Rader, shared exclusively with CNN, that prompted law enforcement in Oklahoma to act. Shortly after Kenny's disappearance, the sheriff's office received an anonymous call.
That male caller informed them that she was located in an old barn.
No evidence that lead was ever looked into. Her body was never found. But authorities are now looking at this journal entry by Rader. Bad Wash Day.
He marked that in 1976, he had